But I found almost nothing harder to absorb than this question of differences in IQ between groups.
Race realism is the statement that races exist in human populations. Races are subdivisions of the human species into groups that differ in various observable and heritable characteristics, including but not limited to skin color and facial features.
You cannot make an argument that nurture is the reason why some sub-Saharan African tribes have the same IQ of a silverback gorilla.
But many JQers say that not only is it dishonest to state that Jews aren't a race, it's unscientific, because Jews exude all of the qualities of a distinct racial group.
Race is a rather nebulous concept, one which, if explained to somebody with no conception of it, could vary wildly from our contemporary understanding of it. Race, though a driving force in our social identities, is not real in the biological sense. Race is not real. Though the history of the concept is so entangled in our understanding of man that the process of deconstructing it is nearly half a century long. Johann Blumenbach was the first to pioneer this idea of race as a biological concept when he, in the late 18th century, divided the human species into 5 distinct races on the basis of skull structure: Caucasian, Mongolian, Malayan, Ethiopian, and American. This was the genesis of race science, and it's been culturally attached to us ever since. This conception, however, is not set in stone. Social attitudes about which kinds of people fall into which race meanders throughout history. To quote Charles Kingsley in a letter to his wife in 1860, "I am haunted by the human chimpanzees I saw along that 100 miles of horrible country. To see white chimpanzees is dreadful. If they were black, one would not see it so much, but their skins, except when tanned by exposure, are as white as ours." This meandering was similarly ingrained into law. Prior to the 1930s, census classification regarded Mexicans as whites. This changed, and social attitudes regarding Mexicans and their status as whites has been in question ever since. Similarly, in Jim Crow South, conceptions of whites varied wildly. Some places regarded a single drop of black blood as invalidating one's racial status as white. This was known as the one-drop rule. If race were so clear-cut as a concept of people who originate from a certain region, then the legal conception of it wouldn't be so volatile in how it changes. It continuously meanders in our social understanding of it too. Many regard Barack Obama as the first black president we have ever had, but he is just as much white as he is black. He could identify as white, and that identification could be just as valid as his identifying as black, except for our social norms dictating what his racial identity is on his behalf. There is no such thing as a race gene. Race is abstract, and what makes one group of people a race compared to another is constantly up for debate. JF defined race as observable differences between groups of people, but we don't actually accept this definition in practice. There is no ginger race. We do not tend to accept the Kalash people as a race, despite that separation being equally valid. We have conceptualized racial groupings largely on the basis of skin color, continent, and culture. Despite these problems, society persists in its belief in a racial division of man. Historical crimes were committed on the basis of this division of people, and it has had tremendously horrific consequences that the world feels today. Whole people have been victims of genocide on the belief that this division is valid. We have accepted segregation of people as an underclass. Indeed, even today, some persist in this belief that race is a valid and biologically real concept. This is the introduction to a new video series, constructed with the assistance of Kevin Bird on the existence of race. New parts will be delivered as they are finished. I hope you will remain committed to the series enough to like and subscribe, and stay up to date as the series concludes.
If you watch the video very closely, it was a scratch, and then, I go to, put my finger on my chin. I didn't usually like to get into it because people usually bring it up on the show, but you got 300 hours of content. I scratched my nose with the wrong angle, and people like to say it's a nose pick. Now, I pick my nose off camera. I think everybody does, but, that was not one of those times.